Hours, President Trump has signed a slew of executive orders, some of them happening in front of a huge crowd election day. Inauguration day, I should say. Just how much power does a president have for some of these proposed changes? Harold Krent, he's a law professor at Chicago Kent College of Law. He's an expert on the powers of the president. You wrote a book about it, didn't you, sir?
I did. Obviously, much has changed, and much is changing with each passing day.
Now, when you say much is changing, what can a president, what kind of executive order can they do or take away? How has that changed since you wrote your book?
So, nothing has changed sort of conceptually because there are two limits to executive orders. One is an executive order can't be inconsistent with the Constitution. And most people think that the birthright order is directly in tension with the constitutional language. And also, a executive order cannot be totally contradictory to a piece of legislation passed by Congress. To date, most of the executive orders aren't directly in tension with congressional legislation, but there may be a couple of them that are. So those are the two big constraints. And obviously, they can only be tested in court. We already see one lawsuit by states, including Illinois, against the Trump administration because of the birthright citizenship executive order. But there'll be many more pieces of legislation, of litigation to come, testing whether the executive orders are consistent, again, with either statute or Constitution.
And that birthright citizenship is the 14th Amendment that it goes solidly against. Let me ask you this. Because of these two things that you mentioned, how is a president or the president able to just make these executive orders like this? Just because he signed it doesn't mean it's law, correct?
That's correct. It's not automatically binding, but it does have the power of the federal funding, federal initiative behind it. So, for instance, in this two-sex executive order limiting to passports to only one of two sexes, that's within the purview of the federal government to make rules on passports. So that's why the executive order exists there. The rule saying that drug cartels are terrorists, to give you another example, basically there is the power of the executive branch to decide who is a terrorist organization. They can be found to be outside the purview of the delegation from Congress, but they have that authority. Or the death penalty one. The president can't do much with respect to death penalty. Then that order just says that his Department of Justice should do what it can to facilitate imposition of the death penalty. And I'm sure he will, but that doesn't change the law.
What about TikTok? He says it can continue to operate for now. And is that run afoul of the law too?
Well, in a sense, it does, because of Congress's clear direction that the TikTok be divested as of last week. But I think that he's suggesting now that he won't enforce it. And because the Department of Justice is the enforcement agency of so much in the United States, including that rule, then he has the discretion to do a pause. Now, somebody could sue for the non-enforcement and say that a competitor of TikTok could sue and say, you have to follow what Congress said. And the courts, though, don't like to wade in those waters, which is just a kind of discretionary enforcement issue. So again, even though Congress has been pretty clear that TikTok should be divested or sold to a U.S. corporation, then the pause initiated by Trump, I think, is some pretty solid legal ground.
Professor, what about this latest news coming down from the White House that the administration says immigration enforcement agents can now arrest migrants at sensitive places like hospitals, churches, and schools? For decades, these places have been considered off limits, safe spaces.
Yeah, and it's great to have safe spaces, and I think many people are in favor of that. But it's just a policy. It was just a sort of recognition by the executive branch it would be unseemly to go into churches, schools, and other places to round up individuals to check on their status.
But can he do this?
He can do it. There's no law against it. Now, if Congress comes back and says, don't do it, then we have a clear clash that could be resolved by the Supreme Court. But this was just a discretionary policy by the administration. probably a sound one, to allow to prevent disruption at schools or hospitals. And we'll have to see how ICE reflects the president's new order.
So I'm getting from you some executive orders may be okay, some won't be okay. We have to look at the law, the legality. The people who it affects have got to go to court.
Absolutely right. And I think what this does suggest, though, is the president has the power of initiative. The president can use the force of the presidency to take this unilateral action that changes so much of life, from the death penalty that we talked about to immigration, to questions about even the name of the Gulf of Mexico, and federal hiring, too. Federal hiring can be frozen by the President Trump. And the telework ban is going to be fascinating as well.
Law professor Harold Krent, thank you so much, sir.
All right, good night.
Good night.